And what do you exactly mean when the Ash'ari were crystallized at the time of Qadi Abu Ya?
What this means is there was, in the time of Al-Qadi Abu Ya and Imam Al-Shahristani, that's the time where the word Ash'ariyya is first referred to.
Okay.
There's people that had his thinking because he had students and other people, but they were still disputing when Imam Al-Hasan Al-Ash'ari, rahimahullah, when he died, the issues that were supposed to be sorted out, they hadn't been sorted out regarding all of his positions and the final shape of what he wanted. And it's something that Al-Qadi Abu Ya rahimahullah pointed out again in the introduction of Talat Ta'wilat. He said, if you look at Abu Hasan Ash'ari and Abu Bakr al-Baqilani, you find that they said, we affirm them as attributes and we don't know their realities. He said, what's happened now that you say they're majaz? So there was this internal struggle and working within the school because things weren't resolved. By the time of Al-Qadi Abu Ya, that's the first instance we have of something called Al-Ash'ariyya. The Shahristani mentions it before. Now it's crystallized. Before that time, it didn't have a name because it wasn't recognized as a Jama'ah yet. So because it wasn't recognized as a Jama'ah, it wasn't there yet because it didn't have a sat down set of principles. Unless you think that a dispute where they were having disputes about whether the prophets committed major and minor sins. Some said, yeah, they do, and some said they didn't. Is that a crystallized creed? No, it's not. Or the arguments of istiwa between Zuhair al-Athari and Abu Hasan Ash'ari and others of whether it's to be this or whether it's that, or whether when Allah mentions ayn in the Quran, whether it's aynain, 2 eyes, or whether it's ayun, like that type of stuff, which is in the Ibana or in Maqalat al-Islamiyin, because they say, well, the Ibana is not authentically attributed to him. Yeah, but Maqalat al-Islamiyin is. Let's say al-Ibana is a forgery. What do you do about the aynain that's mentioned in Maqalat al-Islamiyin? It's in there.
Right.
What has that been corrupted too? How? You're the ones with the manuscripts of it. I have Maqalat al-Islamiyin. It's in there, as well as other things that the Ash'ari today don't believe. Why? Because the crystallization process.
Right.
He was still working out a lot of these things. And he died before he could work his entire theology out. So it was left to his students, and that's not a knock, it's a historical fact. So it was left to his students to work it out. And that finally, that process of gestation came to a root when there were finally a group of people that were known as Al-Ash'ariyya, that have been cited by Shahristani in his Al-Milal wal-Nihl, as well as Imam Al-Qadi Abu Ya rahimahullah, who now refers to this group of people. So that's the first time these expressions have been mentioned. So that's why I use the expression crystallized, because that's the first time we have a group being called Al-Ash'ariyya.
And so this happened with the approval of the Imam Al-Qadi Abu Ya.
Yes, because had they been innovators or major deviants, would have been stamped out.
Sure.
So there's 2 things we should take away from this. Number one, it's indeed, these people are from the Khalaf, and their methodology is from the Khalaf. We get that. But number 2, they're not innovators or kuffar or mu'attila, because had they been, they would have been wiped out, like the Mujassima were. They're wiped out. Well, most of them. Today we still have, but a lot of it is wiped out, right? So these are the things that have to be understood and put in perspective, because when you look at these affairs, you have to remember that Ash-Shahristani, he has a very hawkish view of the Ash'aris. So you can tell that he's not an Ash'ari. But he's not following the first 2 generations because of other things you can see him in as well as his book Al-Iqdam. So he's Maturidi. And because he's in Central Asia, what else would he be?
Okay.
Right. So if you look at one of his quotes, he says, quote, وصنف بعضهم ودرس بعض حتى جرى بين أبي الحسن العشري وبين أستاذه مناظرة في مسألة من مسائل الصلاح والأصلح فتخاصما. So this situation with philosophical proofs and dialectical arguments and principles carried on. until some of them authored works on the topic. And there was a dispute between Abu Hasan Al-Ash'ari and his teacher on the topic of deservedness and goodness and evilness. وانحاز الأشعري إلى هذه الطائفة. So Al-Ash'ari went with this group. فأيد مقالتهم, strengthened their statement. بمناهج كلامية, using speculative methods. فصار ذلك مذهبا لأهل السنة والجماعة. And this became a group of Muslim orthodoxy. وانتقلت سمة الصفاتية إلى الأشعرية. And the people that affirm the attributes named this group Al-Ash'ariyah. Close quote. Now this is from Al-Milal wal-Nahl, volume 1, pages 65 to 66. So we can actually see now. That's two instances where this group of people appeared. And after a period of time, the people that affirm the attributes named this group Al-Ash'ariyah. So that's two instances historically, and they share the same time period. The Shahrastani is the 460s, and Al-Qadi Abu Ya is 458. So they share the same time period. They're contemporaneous. So they saw the appearance of this at the same time, because you have to also remember they sent missionaries into North Africa to spread this theology around the same time, because they arrived in Morocco and Libya and other places. Okay, so what were the Malikis receiving? Because when the Malikis received these missionaries bringing the Ash'ari books and creed, so what exactly were the Ash'aris going into? Like, what was their theology? See, these things have to be asked.
Right.
No one's saying that they're Ahlul Bidah or whatever else. We're saying that there's something that preceded you, and that thing is still here. If you want to be Ash'ari, no one's telling you you better not be, and you can't. But you can't make other people duty bound to follow it, and you also can't say Ahlul Sunnah wal Jama'ah is the Ash'aris and Maturidis. That's not true. They're a branch of Ahlul Sunnah wal Jama'ah, but you're not Ahlul Sunnah wal Jama'ah. No matter how many schools you build, no matter how far you go, you're never going to get everybody to affirm that. That's just the cut and dry of this thing. So I didn't mean to belabor the point, but I just wanted that to be put there
yes,
so that people had a good understanding of this matter, because this issue around Al-Qadi Abu Ya is connected to this one.
Yeah, absolutely.
And it's kind of hard to understand the issue of Al-Qadi Abu Ya without understanding this one.
Yes, absolutely.
There are people who know good and well about this stuff, and they know these affairs. But then, with the very same tongue, they say something totally different in English. That's why I put that quote up from Sheikh Mustafa Hamd al-Ulayan. One of these same people of true Iman and true creed saw Ida'at,
yes,
read it, praised it,
yes,
went back to the US and in English still had it translated the same stuff. Why would you do that when you know that's not true? See, those are the types of things that make you understand those people are duplicitous.
SubhanAllah.
And because it's not just that they're misrepresenting the first three generations and their successors, they're misrepresenting the Ash'aris as well. Imam al-Bulti had visited Al-Duma numerous times. I have an audio recording. At some point, inshallah, if Allah gives me the time, I want to transcribe that and put that up on the Mira TV site, because he's there.
MashaAllah.
I've got photos of them where he's there.
Amazing.
Why would there be this issue?
So we're talking about that he went to visit the stronghold of the Hanabila, basically.
In Sham.
Yes.
Why would he be there?
Allahu Akbar.
Because he knows. When he referred to Shaikh Abdul Qadir Al-Jilani, rahimahullah, when he was being interviewed, he referred to his creed and called him mutamakkin and mutashaddid, firm and stern on Ahlul Sunnah, from the people of Sunnah. He knows that. Subhanallah, he even quoted Taqiyuddin Taymiyyah once and said rahimahullah after him. I thought you said it's major kufr to say Shaykh al-Islam. You blaspheme if you call. I thought you're a kafir if you say Shaykh. He said rahimahullah.
Yes.
And he didn't just say Shaykh, he said Shaykh al-Islam.
Yes.
In one statement, he says, Shaykh al-Islam, Abu al-Abbas. So you knew who he was talking about. He wasn't talking about Majduddin. Why is that the case?
Yes.
But then in English, we're seeing something different. Because they're not representing their own position.
And
they lied about the situation. They lied about the situation between Abu Bakr ibn Abi Dawood and At-Tabari. They lied about Al-Qadi Abu Ya. They lied about Abdul Ghani Abdul Wahid al-Maqdisi, and they lied about Muwaffiq ibn Qudama. It's pathological.
And Ibn al-Jawzi as well, actually.
Yes, they've lied about these things, and it's pathological.
Yeah.
And that stuff has to stop, because you're not just misrepresenting the first few generations, but you're misrepresenting the thing that you claim. You're misrepresenting it. And you know that you're doing it. Now, this time, part of it I can see, because this is a time where that's what's in vogue. Listen, there was a time where when I was first in Mahad, there was a strong tide against the madhhabs. I followed the evidence. In the English-speaking world, there was a strong tide. And we had to swim against that tide. No, we're following the evidence, but we're following the madhhabs as well. We had to be those people. Now it's in vogue. You got to have a madhhab. Even Ahlul Bid'ah say you got to have a madhhab. No, that's what's happened.
Yeah, it is.
Mu'tazila, yeah, man, we're Hanafis. We've always been Hanafis. Like Nasr Abu Zaid, he's considered the Mujaddid of i'tizal in this time, of the Mu'tazila of this time. He's like, of course I'm Hanafi. Of course I have a madhhab. We've always been Hanafis.
Subhanallah.
La hawla wa la quwwata illa billah.
Subhanallah.
The Shia say, yes, we have a madhhab. Yes, for the Jafri madhhab. Now everyone's got madhabs.
Yes.
And everyone's got to have one. Whether they even follow it properly is irrelevant. The point is that you're claiming allegiance to something because that's what's in. Just like right now, we got to be Ash-Sham. Who told you that? Who told you that? You just got told by Al-Qadi Abu Ya, who precedes he was there before your Jama'ah appeared. He witnessed it crystallize. It's like watching paint dry. He witnessed the crystallization of your Jama'ah and said, they're from Ahl al-Hadith. That means there was an Ahl al-Hadith before you were there.
Yes.
That's the whole point.
And if I may ask you one thing on what you just said, I shared this statement once, and there were some statements by some brothers who were saying that they did not need the approval of Al-Qadi Abu Ya. How do we react to this?
I don't. Because you definitely needed the approval, because you would have been stamped out as Ahlul Bid'ah if you didn't.
Right.
The fact of the matter is, we have a historical account where you appeared where you had not been. That's the really important thing.
Indeed.
Was the Ummah fine before you arrived? Yes. Ahmed had defeated the 72 sects. They went underground. They were denied. And Ilm al-Kalam was seen as a bane, as a blot. Unfortunately, you tried to reconcile it to the religion, which reignited many of the older discussions that had been laid to rest. And this is precisely why Abu Muhammad al-Barbahari refused to accept the meeting with Abu Hasan Ash'ari and also the Al-Ibana. It wasn't because he was Ahl al-Bid'ah. It is because he had done this thing. It reopened the door that had been shut. Because who is Abu Muhammad al-Barbahari, who died 329? He sat with the students of Imam Ahmed, one of which was Abu Bakr al-Marudi, who suffered horribly under the Mu'tazila. He was tortured brutally within an inch of his life. So for him, you can only imagine what stories al-Marudi shared with him. What Ahmed went through. He must have shared with him what Ahmed went through, what his sons went through, one of whom walked with a permanent limp after those events. Buwaiti was tortured to death. Al-Khuza'i was tortured to death. These people suffered. Buwaiti was a big Shafi'i. There were no Ash'aris yet, so he couldn't have been that. Shafi'i in his fiqh, but there were no Ash'aris yet, so he couldn't have been that.
Yes.
Abu Nasr al-Khuza'i, big Hanbali Shaykh. Muhammad ibn Nuh, one of the 40 qadis of Imam Abu Hanifa, he suffered. Okay, these people bled and gave their sweat and tears to push all this stuff back. When you did what you did, you kind of reignited some of it. And that's why the response was hawkish. It's not because you're Ahl al-Bid'ah. It's because the doors that have been slammed shut, you kicked them back open again. And what happened? There was a reignition of the cult.
Yeah.
So now you had some of the Abbasid rulers becoming Shiites now, where it had been dampened down, because Al-Mutawakkil ala Allah had affirmed the creed of Imam Ahmed, but claimed the Shafi'i method because he didn't want to claim the Hanbali method. He said, I don't want to be under the authority of Ahmed, because if I do that, I'll be under his thumb. So he's taught by snubbing Imam Ahmed and claiming the Shafi'i school. Okay. I'm still independent. I'm the Khalifa, and that was Mutawakkil ala Allah is still a volume. So these are the things. But subsequent people to him engaged in Twelverism, other things like this, Safawiism and other just Ismailism, Babism, all this other type of stuff. Partly because you reopened a door that didn't need to be opened, it didn't need to be reconciled. That's why people have this issue, because the language that you use, because you came from the 72 sects, the language that you use sounds like the language of the 72 sects, although you mean something different.
Yeah.
That's why there's that dispute. And brothers that read books without understanding the background call the Ash'ari Mu'attila and things like that because they've read the previous books about the Mu'tazila,
Yes.
and they hear them saying the same thing and think, aha, I've caught you.
Yes.
You say that the yed is majaz, and haha, that's what the Mu'tazila say. Yeah, the terminology is the same, but the meaning being poured into that expression that's being used by Sharia is different. But they've chosen to use the same language. Is that a problem? Well, yeah. Well, yes. And it's one of the reasons why Imam Al-Buti rahimahullah, he did not engage. If you look at his books, he didn't go fully into a lot of things like that because he knew the ramifications of it. Because it could cause a shift. It could cause people problems. And that's why you'll find that the people of Sham are very careful about these type of issues.
Yes.
But there's always that one that's got to be, Mr. Controversy and make all types of tribulations. And then you see the sigar of Talabat al-Ilm, then go and learn from this person, get poisoned, go back to their places, right? And it's the same thing. Even what we discussed before about the meeting when they came to Chechnya, it was just a backslapping event because it was all them in a room.
Right.
Where are the rank and file Chechens? Where are the rank and file Dagestanis? It wasn't. It was all you held up in the Hilton Hotel talking about how great you are. So you went somewhere else to preach to yourselves. For what? You didn't. Did you speak to anybody on the street? Did you feed anybody? Did you distribute any zakat or fitr? That's what I'm saying about this type of stuff, how corrosive it is. Because although Al-Qadi Abu Ya is not directly, in a roundabout way, he is connected to this. Because this issue is connected with this of takfir. So we've gone from takfir because you were saying you're not following these guys, and there was 2 or 3 guys in the Middle East that people were clinging to. Now there's 2 or 3 guys in the Middle East that people are clinging to. So wait a minute, what's changed?
Subhanallah.
What, you just put on a different shirt? So before your shirt was yellow and now it's blue. What's changed? They're speaking with the same vitriol. Families are still getting divided. Zakat al-Fitr is not being distributed. It's the same thing. People are still being molested. There's still sex parties and orgies happening. But this time they're being had because you're saying we are Ahl Sunnah from X and Y, Z groups, where before you were saying we're Ahl Sunnah from X group. So this is why there's an issue. I'm telling you, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, people that keep doing this stuff, Allah will pour his wrath out on them. He will exterminate them.
Subhanallah.
He will exterminate and extirpate these people, because no one comes out of this stuff free and clear.
Yes.
Leave this stuff alone. Return to the agreed upon books and agreed upon people, especially if you don't know the historical backdrop and consequences of all this stuff. You're hurling accusations of tashbih and taslim about people you have no idea about, who cast a long shadow over the ummah, a huge shadow over the ummah. And if you understood who they were the sheikhs are, who they were the sheikhs of, you would be like Abu Sa'd al-Mukharrami, who we talked about, right? He's one of the 60 students of Al-Qadi Abu Ya.
MashaAllah.
He's the sheikh of Shaykh Abdul Qadir Al-Jilani. Everyone's agreed he's a big zahid. He's considered a successor to the knowledge of Al-Qadi Abu Ya. He's the successor. He's one of the transmitters of Al-Mukhtasar fi Usul al-Din. He's also transmitted Talat Ta'wilat. He's a transmitter. Mahfuz al-Kalwadani, his manzuma al-Ha'iyya, that manzuma, that urjuza that he did is a mukhtasar of Mukhtasar fi Usul al-Din. They're both people Shaykh Abdul Qadir Al-Jilani took from his successors, and you can tell by reading his Al-Ghunya under the section, you can tell that he was shaped by that.
Subhanallah.
Yeah, you can tell. And that's why people say, oh, that can't be right. No. That's Shaykh Abdul Qadir Al-Jilani. For surety. Yeah. Oh, yes, he definitely wrote that.
because so many people claim Shaykh Abdul Qadir Al-Jilani.
Yeah,
have to deny him.
He definitely wrote that. And it runs alongside of, you can tell in the Lum'ah, because there's a part of Ibtal al-Ta'wilat, as after the introduction, it's like the first bab, Alhamdulillah al-Mahmudi bi kulli lisan. That's in there.
Yes.
And instead of al-Ma'bud bi kulli lisan, it's al-Ma'bud bi kulli ibad. So you can tell that in the course of putting together all of Imam Ahmad's 12 books on theology, you can tell he also perused that kitab as well. You can tell. So what are we talking about here? We're talking about these giants.
Right.
That's what we're talking about. Leave these people alone. Because listen, anyone that tries to punch a mountain, rocks fall down. There's no way you can do it. These people are mountains that are 17,000 feet high, 20,000 feet high, 14,000 feet high. These are people that they don't want any problem with these people. Their rank is huge. And we already read his biography. His rank is in many different areas. Well, his son said that, and his son could be biased because those. Okay, what about Imam Al-Zahabi, who's Shafi'i?
Yes.
In his book. Well, what about Imam Ibn Kathir in his Al-Bidayah wa Nihaya? He talks about Qadi Abu Ya, and he uses the same glowing words. In fact, he also calls him thiqa. You can't be thiqa if you're a mujassim mushabbih.
Exactly.
So as Imam Al-Zahabi calls him thiqa. And what do you do with that situation? And we know Ibn Kathir was Ash'ari because he taught a Jamia Ashrafiyya, and you have to do a declaration of your Ash'ari in order to get in.
Yeah, and
teach. So we know for a fact, he's Ash'ari.
This is actually what I just wanted to ask you, because if people read the theology of Al-Qadi Abu Ya, then they will know who he is. But let's say somebody is unable to understand it, but they can go back and reference to these books by Ibn Kathir, by Al-Dhahabi, and these are imams who mention him in a positive light.
Yes. And they give because they're biographies of him. They're looking at this from a purely historical angle. Yes. Those are separate to discuss. That's a separate issue. But in order for someone to be thiqa historically, in order to be that, you can't have the type of mistakes that they're attributing to him.
Yeah, exactly.
You just can't. That's why Abu Muhammad al-Barbahari is called among he's called among the muttaqun and thiqat. He's called among the muttaqun and thiqat. Al-Imam Al-Kabir. The big imam. Not the small one, the big one. So people have to understand that it's not a light matter what's being done.
Like
And this is the same thing that happened before, because you had an entire generation of people 30 years ago reviling Imam Al-Nawawi and Ibn Hajar and burning their books. Then you've got people now that are going and reviling Taqi ibn Taymiyyah. Now you've got people that are reviling Al-Qadi. It's like, subhanAllah. Yes. Can there be just a time where you sit down and just read? Or where you actually learn rather than getting caught up? You can't, you can, but you should not get caught up in the spirit of the age.
Yes.
That's the spirit of the age. And it's a contaminant because it's an obstacle to knowledge. And every single one of these sighar talabat al-ilm, every single one of them I've seen, they don't memorize anything. They don't memorize because they're so busy railing against Ibn Arabi or Taqi ibn Taymiyyah and all these other things. This is subhanAllah. And the lady, the unfortunate part about it, the actual lady, and some of the people who've taken them as their sheikhs, the sighar talabat al-ilm, are probably more knowledgeable than them. But they're being made to downplay their own ilm because these people are sitting at a dais or a big desk, or they've got a satellite dish at their house to where they're transmitting their minuscule lessons. And people are like, yeah, man, that's the sheikh. It's like, you're probably more knowledgeable than him. You probably have more ilm than him. You probably memorize more Quran than him. What are you following him for?
And these students of knowledge who are making these mistakes, I mean, who are teaching these English-speaking people, are they doing so out of ignorance?
There's no way to tell, because here's the thing. The fact that they're making these statements and doing these things, are you reading this literature and ignoring it? Or are you choosing to not read this literature?
Exactly.
These things are coming from a particular bent. They're coming from a particular bent of thought. And again, as I said before, you can tell there's the influence of the Aicp. Because the way the language is being used and how it's being used. And the intolerance of what's being used and the ignoring of historical precedent. But even they, as a lead off, even they aren't being true to their teacher. Because I met a man in the US by the name of Dr. Abdul Hadi. And Dr. Abdul Hadi was accompanied Shaikh Abdul Al-Harari for more than 20 years. When he was back in Harar and came and left with him from Harar to Lebanon, and also was in Damascus with him. And much of the positions that the Aicp have, Dr. Abdul Hadi did not have. Which makes me wonder how much of what's in the Aicp is actually Shaikh Abdullah Al-Harari and is actually from them.
Right.
And this is important because there's an entire body of people being affected by this type of thinking. And it never ends well. This type of thing, it never ends well. Because this is what wound up, people making takfir on Imam Al-Buti as well as what was This is what happened.
Yeah.
And then we were like, okay, so who are the big sheikhs today then? Well, we have so-and-so. Okay, who after him?
Yeah.
Well, so-and-so has said that, no. Just give me like 5 names.
Exactly.
You asked me who were some of the Muraja, the Hamis. I can give you names. I give you like 4 or 5 names. They're not all of them, but I give you like 4 or 5 names to stick out.
Yeah.
Okay, who are the fuqaha? I can give you 5 names, 5, 6 names. But you tell me just one person, or we don't know about anybody else. What are you talking about, man? What is he, a prophet?
Yes, that's strange.
See, but these people are following it. And it looks to be the case that's the segue of how it arrived in the US to some degree, not all the way, but to some degree, and particularly the East Coast.
Interesting.
It was on the West Coast, but it couldn't survive on the West Coast because the environment of the West Coast is so hostile in terms of so many different things. But the East Coast, it took root. And I hear people when they're speaking in the language of the IC say, yeah, he's been influenced by that stuff. I can hear it. Because it's a method, just like when you hear, because there's a certain mashrab, there's an influence that they have, like when you're listening to someone from the Khawarij speak, because there's a way that they talk, right? That you can tell the Mu'tazili, there's a way that they talk, right? Well, in this case, there's a way that they talk,
right?
And that's why they're so they're hesitant to tell you, okay, who are you taking? Like, who are the big guys today? I don't like to mention people today. Yeah, because you know that if we pressed you, there'd be a problem.
Yeah.
All the people that I make taqleed of today have the same theology as me. So I'm not worried about, who are the people? They're this. They're him, and him.
Not rely upon one scholar.
No. These are the people today. Him, and him.
Yes.
And the same thing goes for the Ash'ari. Yeah, the big Ash'ari today, him. Big Maturidi, him. Right? I'm not worried.
Yeah.
Right? Because that's being balanced within the body of Ahlul Sunnah. But when you're like, well, you see, and hold on, why is this like this?
And then they bestow titles and ranks upon this one scholar that he does not even have.
Yeah, well, and they get themselves into these situations because then it just takes one person to pull out 3-4 quotes from some of these big imams who only recently died. I could pull out some stuff from Imam Wahab al-Zuhayr. It's like, wait a minute, what? Because it's completely different.
Yes, absolutely.
It's like, wait a minute, what? I pull out some stuff from Imam Bhuti. Wait a minute, what? I pull out some stuff from even some of the recent ones. Like I start pulling out some, not just the recent ones, like some of the people that preceded them, like Ali al-Daqar or Habbannaka. And you start seeing these people, it's like, it's like, yeah, see, I told you, stop playing these silly games.
Like giants like Maturidi and Hassani.
Yeah, these type of people, when you start pulling out things, look, this is what they said. Well, I mean, yeah, but you see, no, there is no but you see.
Yes.
You are running contrary to your own imams. How is that?
I was just recently reading a sharh on the Riyadh al-Salihin, and this is a commentary by Imam Mustafa al-Baghdadi and others, and they were just affirming in one sharh that the best way is tafweed. They said we also have ta'wil, but the best way is tafweed.
That's keeping in line. Yeah, that's in keeping in line with Imam Al-Nawawi and Al-Qadi Abu Ya. They're running alongside that track. And that's being truthful, and it's doing what's called naqal. Naqal is when you don't just pass down the text, but you pass down the text with the understanding that was meant to be kept. So this is the text, and here's the understanding that they passed down with the text, how it was meant to be transmitted.
And interestingly enough, the ones that we're quoting, they are not mentioned when you go to these groups.
And it's a sad shame because they're the very senior imams.
Exactly.
They're your senior imams, and they say this. How did this happen? How do you get to the point where you're openly in conflict with Imam Al-Nawawi and Al-Qadi Abu Ya?
That's bizarre.
Or a Shahrastani. They'll mention, oh yes, his book Al-Iqdam and Ilm al-Kalam. Yeah, but look what he said in Middle Nahr. Well, I mean, yeah, but no, there is no yeah, but that's it. That's what he's established. And we can see that these things have been established. So why are you in this condition? We got Mullah al-Qari with a Sharh al-Fiqh al-Akbar calling Taqiyud ibn Taymiyyah Shaykh al-Islam and saying Rahimahullah after his name, and sometimes saying Qaddas Allahu sirrahu.
Right.
What? That's for big high ranking Sufis. Yeah, he did say that though. Why did this happen? Well, I think we all know why it happened. But you try to live in a world where you ignore history, then you're only going to fall on your face. It won't be good what happens. But people have to learn at their own pace. I just want, as a final thing for moving forward, here's all I want from the common slave of Allah. I'm a student of knowledge, trying to study for a test. This is all I want from the students, from the common slave of Allah in the street. You should not have imposed on you anything that was not imposed from the first 3 generations. You're to follow the first 3 generations and what they handed down to you. What they handed down to you is the methodology of discharging your salah, whether it's the Bosrans, which came to be known as Hanabila, the Hijaz can be known as the Malikis, the Egypt can be known as the Shafi'is, the Kufans and then known as Hanafis. Those are all Sahaba and Tabi'in that built this up. And these Imams, their names are on there because they're the collectors. You should establish that. Your creed, if you're saying, I don't know, or I have no idea, you were doing that when you came into Islam anyway. When you first came into Islam, there was a whole bunch of stuff you were told, I didn't know that. I didn't know that. I didn't keep saying that. Because you won't get in trouble for what you didn't investigate into when it comes to these matters. But when you do speak, you will be questioned. If you decide to say, okay, well, yes, I like Imam Al-Nawawi, so I'm going to follow him and Al-Qadi Iyad's theological disposition. Fine, but do it rightly. Do it wisely and do it with knowledge. And do it with wisdom. You are not duty bound to get involved in the contemporary debates that are tearing apart some sectors of the Muslim heartlands. You live in Dar al-Kufr. Why are you involved in debates that are ripping apart Cairo? That's not your affair. And unfortunately, whether it was brought to the Caucasus, that fitna was brought there. You guys weren't having that type of war that was brought there.
Yes.
Salafiyah came there. Now this is there. What is going to be? What are you going to try to kill us twice?
Yeah.
Egypt had the same thing. That's why secularism is making inroads
Subhanallah.
in the north. South, they just kill you down there. Because no, man, listen, we don't know, man. What are you talking about? Our sheikhs told us we don't know. They kill you. Because those people are firmly established on we don't know. Because one of these people tried to go down there and oh yes, I'm coming to you as from the household of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and he tried to spread that stuff. It went over people's heads. People were like, huh? Because we get, visit the awliya, read Yasin for them, everything else. You started trying to get theological. I'm looking at the crowd of these are people from where I'm from, South Egypt. The eyebrows wrinkled. Guys are like, what? I'm confused, man. Because it goes over their head. I don't know what was that dude talking. If you ask someone, Ashhari, no, and I don't have a lot of hair. Because they're just gonna think it means hairy. They really don't know this stuff. And Maturidi, this is not an Arabic word, it's a loan word. So people don't know, they're gonna assume this is a location or a place. They don't know that it's a theological bent. They don't.
And they don't have a need for it.
No, they don't. They don't have a need for it. If they get knowledge later on and they decide that, that's what I'm going to, that's okay. That's okay for them to do. But don't make them obliged to do something that they're not obliged to do. That's all I'm saying.
Yes.
Because they don't deserve to have their lives brought into something that they don't need to at the time. That's all I'm saying. So that's what I wanted to put across. Now, you had a question over something else?
Yeah, just one more remark before we continue is that you mentioned the Aicp, and I just wanted to put it out, like, they're not the people of innovation, but they're what we call aberrant Sunnis. And
yes.
This means that they have an exaggeration in an aqa'id.
Yes, they have an exaggeration in aqa'id. And I put on the blog, which maybe might be a good idea to put under there.
Sure.
In the description box, the quotes regarding the Aicp that the scholars have put, because it's important to understand this, that there's some exaggerations because of their zeal for Allah and His Messenger and their hatred for innovation, particularly Salafiyah. They went to such and extreme that they've actually castigated some big imams.
Yes.
Imam Al-Bulti, Imam Wahab al-Zuhaili. They made takfir on Shaykh Muhammad al-Sharawi, another big man. They made takfir on him, in addition to Taqi ibn Taymiyyah, in addition to Ibn al-Qayyim. And some, because I've met different ones, sometimes they make takfir on Ibn Kathir, sometimes they don't. Okay, so when you understand that, and some of them call the Al-Amir Muawiyah radiallahu anhu a fasiq. Okay. So these are things that have occurred because of their exaggeration.
Yes.
And they're dangerous aqa'id because they could lead into corruption of the i'tiqad, which could make its way to usul-din. That has not happened, alhamdulillah. But brothers advise them and tell them, hey, stay away, look out, these types of things, because often when brothers come into the deen and that is their application. I know one Muslim brother who was pulled into this when I was in the US, and because of how much he reads, he's a very vociferous reader, and he's a vociferous and voluminous reader. He reads omnivorously. Because of that, they could never keep a hold on him. Because when you read on that level, you won't get held into a group.
Exactly.
And so because of that, he wound up saying, I think I ran my course with them. And he pulled away from it. But for other slaves of Allah that didn't have that or didn't start out being major readers, you can get pulled into it.
Yeah.
And you can wind up taking stances that you don't need to take as a common layman, getting involved in battles that aren't your battle as a layman, getting involved in controversies that don't even apply to you as a layman. You're trying to learn your Shafi'i fiqh and your other things, and you're engaged in these huge wars.
And we know that takfir is not from the foundations of Iman.
It's not from there. So it's like, okay, well, whoever didn't call him a kafir is a kafir. It's like, well, wait a minute, hold on. What are you talking about? Takfir mu'ayyan? Yes, we know the Jews and Christians are unbelievers, but it's like we start saying, no, whoever didn't call this person a kafir, it's like, wait a minute, hold on. It's his name in the Quran.
Yes.
No. Is it in the Sunnah? No. So why am I doing about Tabbat yada? I understand Abu Lahab is in there. If you say, yeah, man, I look at the eye Abu Lahab, I said, no, I don't accept that. So yeah, that's cool. You say something then. But Taqi ibn Taymiyyah or Ibn Arabi, they're not in the Quran.
SubhanAllah.
These are actions that are in here. So we have to, be wise about these things and not get caught up in these battles, because those things, they have the potential to destroy not only your knowledge, but they can kill your heart. This stuff can kill your heart. It can really, really do some damage and have you in a bad state in this life and the akhirah. Because true enough, it's been said that the flesh of the scholars is poison. That's true. That's true. And that man adali waliyan fa'adhantuhu bil haram. Whoever shows enmity to my wali, I've announced war against him. That hadith, Imam Al-Qadi's collection, you can't deny that.
Yes.
And that's true. And that's why anybody that's tried to go against this or do whatever else, whether when they've unsheathed the sword against the laity, where people made takfir on most of the ummah, things like that. There's an ijma from Imam Buhuti that he quotes where he said, if anybody declares most of the ummah astray, he said particularly the laity, there's ijma, no doubt of the kufr of such a person. Don't you ever unsheathe your sword against this ummah. Don't you ever do that. They're the overwhelming preponderance of the ummah. Why would you make it a necessity for little Fatima al-Fihri, who spins wool? She's got to know about Taymiyyah ibn Arabi, everything else. I'm just trying to do my azkar and look after my husband and my family. I need to discharge my fiqh. That's really what she needs to know. These other affairs. So, most that can be said.
Jazakallah khair. It was very useful and enlightening.